Fox News alert now, Matthew's fury. The powerful hurricane is pounding Florida's east coast right now. Authorities are warning the danger for Matthew is on as it marches up the eastern seaboard. Next, what could be an epic storm surge and life-threatening flooding. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Sandra Smith. Co-host of After the Bell on Fox Business, Melissa Francis. Commentator and national spokesperson for the Libre Initiative, Rachel Campos-Duffy. And today's hashtag One Lucky Guy, the deputy editor of the Wall Street Journal's editorial page and panelist on the Weekly Journal editorial report, which airs right here on Fox News Channel, Daniel Henniger. And welcome.
Good to be with you.
Yeah.
Hey, Dan. Great to have you.
Nice You've been writing so much. I so enjoy what you write.
Oh, thanks. That's good to hear.
All right.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you're here for a busy news day. We'll get to it.
Yep.
Okay. Now to the news. Hurricane Matthew's 120-mile-an-hour winds have been lashing Florida's coast for hours now, and more to come as it moves toward Georgia and the Carolinas. Look at your screen. Stunning images now from Daytona. 3 million people warned to go inland. Hundreds of thousands of people and businesses have lost electrical power and other utilities. Reports coming in of significant damage already. Governor Rick Scott says we learned a lot from Superstorm Sandy, what the surging ocean can do, and he is most worried about the low-lying parts of Florida's 500-mile-long coast. Watch.
We are very concerned about storm surge, and the worst effects are still likely to come. We're very focused on Jacksonville. There's potential for significant flooding there. Damage assessments are just coming in from South Florida. They will continue as the storm passes each county.
Well, the storm has everybody's attention at this point, but a short time ago, President Obama was still urging people to heed the instructions of emergency officials, saying it is too soon to let your guard down.
I just want to emphasize to everybody that this is still a really dangerous hurricane, that the potential for storm surge, flooding, loss of life, and severe property damage continues to exist, and people continue to need to follow the instructions of their local officials over the course of the next 24, 48, 72 hours.
Chief Meteorologist Janice Dean is live from the Fox Extreme Weather Center. A couple of changes in just the last hour or so. One confirmed death from the storm, and also 650,000 now without electricity.
Yeah, and we continue to see a very strong hurricane. This is a Category 3 storm, and I'm glad you played that soundbite from President Obama, because I think a lot of times when we're in the middle of these things and we don't see storm pictures or damage right away, it's like, well, they were wrong. It didn't do anything. We dodged a bullet. And I hate that expression, because we don't know what the legacy of this storm is, and we knew that we were going to be into this for days, and that's what's happening right now. Jacksonville, also Brunswick, Georgia, up towards South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia. We still have a lot of storm to cover here, and it's still a major hurricane just off the coast of Florida. Taking a look at the storm surge forecast, this is the crucial part that we are worried about in the next 12 to 24 hours. So you've got the storm, you've got Matthew offshore here, you've got the counterclockwise winds, and the coast that bends in like this, and the low-lying areas at sea level, and 10 to 12 foot storm surge on top of, in some cases, high tide, is going to put things underwater here. And that's why the National Weather Service is putting out indications that this could be a Hurricane Sandy type event for the southeast coast, much like we saw across the northeast. And Sandy was a Category 1 hurricane that was transitioning into a nor'easter type storm. So you can't look at a category of a storm and say, well, because it's not a 4, it's not really a big deal. No, this is a serious situation, and that's why we have evacuations right now for North Florida into Georgia and South Carolina. And we still have the strongest winds now moving into Daytona Beach. You saw those visuals coming in. Those are hurricane force winds. We had winds in excess of 100 miles per hour off Cape Canaveral this morning, and we haven't assessed the damage yet. That will come in days ahead, but we still have hurricane warnings for millions of people. We still have people hunkered hunkering down or trying to get out of low-lying areas across Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, because all indications are this storm, this hurricane, is going to exist for the next 24 to 36 hours and bring not only storm surge, but the potential for feet, or at least a foot or more of rainfall along the coast, depending on where the center of this storm tracks. And so we're going to be dealing with this, unfortunately, for the next several days into the weekend and maybe into next week as well.
All right, so I can tell by your map that the Florida-Georgia line arrival of this storm was right on time. We're in the noon hour, and it was set to happen right around that time. So it looks like the storm, according to what you're telling us now, you're right on track with how long it takes to get to places. St. Augustine claims to be the oldest city in America with a 6 to 9 foot surge in that Spanish colonial architecture. That town could see some changes, and those are the parts that you've been talking about that have never seen this sort of thing. I just throw it out there as an example.
That's a good example, and that's why we had Nikki Haley on, and the governor of Georgia as well, because these areas are very low-lying and they haven't experienced a storm surge of 10 to 12 feet on top of, again, some areas that could have high tides. So you need to know the geography of your coastline and where you live to see if you are vulnerable to storm surge. And, you know, it's our role as forecasters to tell you where the storm is. It's your role as a family member, a mom or a dad, to go to safety. And if you live in these low-lying areas and you are prone to storm surge or flooding, you need to evacuate or get to higher ground.
A lot of prayers for that part of the country. Their responsibility to get to safety, also not to harm others who might try to rescue them.
Right.
Janice Steen will come back to you as the news warrants on this. Thank you.
You got it.
All right, now we want to go to one of the areas hit hard by this storm. That is wind that you can hear howling in Daytona Beach, where Hurricane Matthew is battering the coastline there with heavy rain. Our own Leland Vittert is live, braving the storm there from Daytona Beach. Leland, a lot of talk about this concentric, concentric eye walls that have formed, that outer eye wall. As we know, it's those eye walls that carry those extreme winds, the thunderstorms like the one that you're standing in right now. What are you seeing and hearing there?
No, we were here, ladies, as that eye wall came abreast of Daytona Beach here. The eye of the hurricane was still fairly offshore here, but the eye wall came through those really strong winds, and it was tough. Our Greg Gursky braved the elements out there, shooting some very real video showing you what it was like to be out there, and we saw yachts and boats being tossed around like rubber duckies in a kid's bath, and that is the force and power of these storms. The worst was right around 10 to 11 o'clock during that hour, and now back here live we're experiencing what you may say is the beginning of the end, which means a lot of rain, a lot of really swirling winds, and then of course still the worry about the storm surge. And during hurricanes, as everyone has been saying, it's great to talk about the winds. The video looks great. It's really cool to look at, things swaying in the wind and reporters walking against the wind, those kinds of things. What causes all the damage and what costs lives is the flooding, and of course is also the storm surge that brings this water in. And you can see just one of the many intersections here in Daytona Beach that's flooded, that is continuing to have rising water. And you take a look at these folks who are driving through right now. Sir, you live around here?
Yeah. You need any help?
No, we're good. We're just coming out and covering. How's your house doing?
House is doing fine. I was just securing some boats over at the yacht club.
How are the boats?
Well, all the canvas is ripped off of them. Some of them are riding up on the piling, so you have to go aboard and you have to tighten up on the lines to haul them off the pilings because the lines stretch and people forget that.
Is this worse than you thought it would be?
Oh no, this is nothing.
This is nothing? Do you feel like it's over by now, or what are you thinking?
It'll be over within an hour or so. This is nothing, you know.
How long have you lived here?
I've been here about 15 years.
So you've seen it all?
Yes, and I've been out on hurricanes out on the ocean. This is nothing.
All right.
This is like half a hurricane.
All right, we appreciate it. Stay safe
Okay.
out there. Thank you.
Need help today?
No, we're good. Thank you, sir. You get a sense sort of how these communities come together during hurricanes. People stop and you say, hey, do you need help? Do you need water? Do you need food? Those kinds of things as you're out here covering them. this guy obviously is pretty experienced, but if you get a sense as he was driving through here, another 2-3 inches of water, maybe a foot of water, which would be very possible to get here in the next, say, 3 or 4 hours. These intersections would become totally impassable, especially to sedans. All back in here are neighborhoods, and a lot of people, ladies, decided to stick it out. As that guy did, he's pretty experienced, but a lot of people who've moved to Florida in the past 10 years didn't understand what the power of hurricanes are. And if you look around, the power's out everywhere. I don't know if any of you spent much time in Central Florida in the middle of October, but there's a key essential ingredient to Central Florida in October. That's called air conditioning that people are going to be without for a very long time.
Leland, that was just an amazing firsthand account of a resident who's lived there 15 years to say this is nothing. He drives off and he's almost flooded out. He's in a big four-wheel vehicle, but to your point, the community coming together, offering each other help. What are you seeing as far as cars and boats? He said he was out at the yacht club securing boats. Have you started to see the water levels rise to a point where it's affecting parked cars, things like that? Another car driving by behind you, by the way.
Barely. But yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, one going one direction, one going the other way. It hasn't yet gotten to the point where we've seen any real, what you might call, cars flooded and floating away, those pictures of boats in parking lots, those kinds of things. People were expecting it. It's one of the reasons we sort of staged where we were off the outer islands and those kinds of things. But so far, that hasn't materialized. Important to note, though, that doesn't mean it won't materialize. High tide is just about right now, and as that storm surge moves in, it's very possible to still have some of those effects. And one of the things that the first responders will tell you, the police and the fire department here, is they'll say, hey, look, it's great that things may not have been as bad as they seem, but that doesn't give everybody an excuse to run around and drive around and look around and try to see what happened, because oftentimes that's when people get the most hurt, especially in those high water situations, ladies.
Yeah, and as far as those emergency efforts, as you said, while he might say things aren't so bad, without power and not knowing when that power is going to return, this could be a very long story and a very long few days. Leland Vittert, live from Daytona Beach for us. Thank you. All right, well, more on this monster storm as it continues to take a toll, taking aim at a large portion of the southeast. The latest track of Hurricane Matthew. Plus, Donald Trump dropping some hints on his big strategy as Sunday's debate format poses a different kind of test for the two candidates.
With millions of people still in its path, a Fox News alert and just an update for you. Matthew, Hurricane Matthew, now a Category 3 storm. We do know National Guard have been out and in force in at least the first state it hit, Florida. Authorities going from town to town to see as it leaves areas what damage is left behind so they can try to get some public services back up. The big problem right now are the hundreds of thousands of people without electricity and other utilities. We don't talk about it much, but when you're low-lying and you get water, you lose your water and your sewer. It can be a nightmare just in terms of trying to go day by day until they can get those services back on. Meanwhile, they have been reportedly able to restore about 150,000 points of electricity back to homes and businesses. This is Hurricane Matthew as it marches up the eastern seaboard. We'll keep you posted.
All right, we are just now 2 days away from the second presidential debate. Donald Trump denying his New Hampshire town hall last night was a practice run, and also taking a swipe at Hillary Clinton being off the campaign trail as her aides say she is preparing for Sunday's showdown. Watch.
They said Donald Trump is going to New Hampshire to practice for Sunday. This has nothing to do with Sunday. And it's like they make you into like a child. And this has, I love the people of New Hampshire. This was set up a little while ago. They were going to cancel it. And I said, why are you going to cancel it? Well, you wanted debate prep. I said, forget debate prep. I mean, give me a break. Do you really think that Hillary Clinton is debate prepping for 3 or 4 days? Hillary Clinton is resting.
Yes.
Yes, I do think she is.
All right, well, the GOP nominee also signaling he'll stay focused on policy Sunday night, telling the New York Post he will not bring up Bill Clinton's scandals. Meantime, Karl Rove says the stakes are high for Trump in the next debate.
Sunday night is going to be really critical for Trump to have a good debate night where people say either he won or he came close to winning and held his own and projected an image that causes his supporters to say we're moving forward and we're getting enthusiastic.
The Washington Post pointing out that Hillary Clinton faces challenges due to the town hall style debate format. That format calls for relatability as the candidates will interact with the audience members who will be asking the tough questions. Dan, who will this format benefit the most? The town hall style format, of course, they'll be fielding questions from undecided voters, and they'll also have the opportunity to get up, move around the stage a little bit, be a little more who does that benefit?
Well, I think it actually benefits Donald Trump the most. And the reason I say that is because not just this town hall the other night in New Hampshire, but we have been here once before, and that was the infamous Matt Lauer town hall over the commander-in-chief. And I thought Donald Trump really did pretty darn well in that town hall. I think especially of the one question he got from a woman who was a graduate at West Point. And she said to him, what would you do if one of these undocumented workers wanted to stay in the United States because they wanted to join the U.S. military? And Trump said, you know, I would have to think about that. Anyone who wants to serve in the American Armed Forces is somebody who is serious about loving America. So I would consider that. That was the last thing that woman expected to hear from Donald Trump. So I think he's capable of relating to people. And as for Hillary Clinton, you know, the one thing she cannot do is sound like a normal person. Hillary's,
Oh my goodness, that's true, actually.
Hillary always sounds like the worst fourth grade teacher you ever had. Please, Miss Clinton, will you stop yelling at us? And I think in a format like this where she's talking to people, she always seems to be lecturing them.
So she's prepping right now. Do you think she's working on that? Can you work on being more personable?
You know, Trump, do heavyweight boxers train and practice before the big bout? Do baseball players practice, golfers? Politics is a professional activity. It's a professional skill at the highest level. And she's training to do that right now. And he is deluding himself if he thinks he can just walk in off the street and compete at that level.
And Melissa, you, as I was leading in, you were having a good laugh because you were saying, yes, of course she's prepping.
Yeah, she's practicing.
Trump says she's resting.
Yeah, no, of course she's practicing. And of course he's practicing at that town hall in New Hampshire. I mean, thank goodness. I mean, he says, forget practice. I don't need practice. We all went, oh, come on. Yes, of course you do. We all know that. Thank goodness it does seem like he's doing it. But I do think, I agree with you. I think this is a good format for him because I do think he is sincere in his relating to people. Like where he said there, I love the people of New Hampshire. That is something all politicians say. But you could see it's not canned. I mean, he did really feel that way.
Rachel, quickly, what do you expect?
I was just going to say, my husband does town halls. You guys have all met him. He's a warm person, and I think that really comes across, and you can't fake it. I mean, you have to know your answers, but you can't fake really caring about people. You can't fake empathy. It just shows, and there were cringeworthy moments on the campaign trail for Hillary in the primary where a woman cried in a town hall, and she literally scooted back against the wall. I don't know if you remember that moment. She was talking about her son passing away. So those kinds of things don't come naturally. They're going to be hard for her to come.
All right. And you know where to find all the debate coverage that you will want and need. We are all over it this Sunday, wall-to-wall coverage. And, of course, the main event happens at 9 p.m. Eastern right here on Fox News Channel. All right, we are watching Hurricane Matthew for you as the storm batters the east coast of Florida. 120 per mile hour winds knocking out power to hundreds of thousands of people there with fears that the worst may still yet to come. We'll have more coverage on Matthew just ahead, plus growing questions about the impact of this storm on the election as Matthew hits one of the most important swing states. How this will play into both campaigns, especially with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump set to debate again. It's happening Sunday night.
Hurricane Matthew is doing its work on Florida right now and beyond. The Category 3 storm is scraping the shoreline as we speak. Top winds 120 miles per hour. Let's take a live picture now of the driving rain in Savannah. That's on the left part of your screen. As you know, Georgia and northern parts of Florida, Jacksonville, are bracing for the full brunt of this storm. And what would that look like? A storm surge of anywhere from 6 to 12 feet is what we've been learning. Electrical power, more than 650,000 people without it at this hour, as well as other utilities, as we've been talking about. And the dangerous swirling winds creating potentially devastating surges, picking up that ocean water and pushing it like a wall into the land. Matthew barrels north now. Florida Governor Rick Scott is warning, quote, the worst part is yet to come. Brian Yennis is live in Wabasso Beach, Florida, with the latest. Brian?
Hi, Harris. Where I am in Wabasso, which is in between Orlando and West Palm Beach, the treasure coast of Florida here. And really, a lot of people here are breathing a sigh of relief. You can see, though, some of the damage that this hurricane has caused. But a lot of people here were expecting a lot worse. And thankfully, for this part of the state in South Florida, what we've been seeing is things like this. Down trees, some localized little bit of flooding up to, just a few inches. Some down power lines, some of those 600,000 plus that are now without power in the Palm Beaches and the Treasure Coast up into the Cape Canaveral region. NASA saying that the Kennedy Space Center even suffered some minimal damage. Airlines, by the way, are starting to come back online. Palm Beach International, Miami International, Fort Lauderdale are all resuming flights slowly but surely, coming off after, 4,500 flights were canceled between Wednesday and tomorrow. Orlando International Airport is closed until Saturday morning. But again, this is the kind of damage that we've been seeing throughout all of South Florida here, as that eye stayed off the coast a little bit more east, just 20 miles or so more to the west, and this could be a completely different story. Locals and people have been telling us they've had some damage, minimal to their roof, a little bit of localized flooding, but nothing they're not used to for some of these other storms. But again, it's important to reiterate what you said, Harris. The worst is yet to come, perhaps for Jacksonville and Duval, Flagler, Nassau County. Those are the counties close to Georgia, as that surge that could be up to 11 or 12 feet is coming in at the time of high tide. And that is the concern right now for those areas. But here along the Treasure Coast and in South Florida, the damage seems to be, what you see here. This is kind of the worst of what we've seen thus far, Harris.
Yeah, one of the things that we've been talking about is just all the people without electrical power, and they've been working so hard to restore that so quickly. 150,000 already restored homes and businesses. So those crews, I'm just curious, are you seeing them out and about? Because it would take the kind of woman and manpower for utilities companies that would almost be nothing like we've seen since Sandy.
Exactly. What they do here in Florida, we're used to the storms down here, but thousands of people are pre-positioned. These utility workers are pre-positioned before the storm to make sure that as that storm moves through, they're able to come in and put the power on as the storm moves out so that people are without power for the least amount of time. Just to let you know, though, Hurricane Wilma, when that hit in 2005 and when Florida was hit by those 8 hurricanes in 2004, 2005, Florida Power and Light invested some $2 billion into infrastructure so that to make these power lines sturdier, to make sure that some of these things were actually put underground so that people wouldn't have to go 2 or 3 weeks without power like they did when Francis and Jean and Wilma hit back in 2004, 2005. Thus far, from what we've been hearing on the radio and local reports and from locals themselves, they are pleased with the response that they're seeing from Florida Power and Light and the thousands of brave utility workers who put themselves out here and leave their families at home to make sure that people get the power on as soon as they can.
That's right. Harris. So glad you were able to give us part of the story. And while you were talking, we were showing Daytona Beach. So as this thing moves through, yes, it does leave what you're seeing behind, but boy, when it comes through, it is pounding hard. Brian Yennis, thank you very much.
Now to growing questions about the impact Hurricane Matthew could have on the election. Both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump's campaigns canceling events in Florida. Clinton's campaign asking Florida for more time to register voters, but Governor Rick Scott said no. This as the Clinton team is coming under fire for running ads on the Weather Channel. The ads were pulled, but RNC Chairman Reince Priebus tweeting, quote, pulling these ads after getting caught won't cut it. Hillary Clinton should apologize for using storm votes. Here's reaction to that from the Clinton campaign spokesperson Bobby Mook.
It's unfortunate that Chairman Priebus is trying to politicize the hurricane. We were in the process of buying television time nationwide on hundreds of different media outlets. The Weather Channel, which is less than 1% of the television time that we were buying, was part of that. Since the storm has clearly become very serious, We have asked the Weather Channel to roll back that buy until the storm is concluded.
Interesting. That was Robbie Mook, obviously. I said Bobby, mistake. What's your reaction to that? Do you buy that? Do you buy that excuse?
Well, I think this is one of the times where I actually agree with the Clinton campaign, their original move. Listen, hard-working people give you $25, $50 for a campaign. As a political spouse, I always feel very responsible about how those dollars are spent. It makes sense to put them on the Weather Channel now. It's a good use of your money instead of putting it on another channel where people aren't watching. So I just think it's all of this faux outrage, and it's all for, political purposes. Use the money properly and put it where your money is going to get its biggest
I think
that's
Rachel's
an interesting perspective. I mean, it's very honest. Go ahead.
Well, she's making a good point. I mean, the hurricane happens to happen coincidentally with a presidential campaign, and Florida is a win or lose state. They've got to win Florida. And Florida's being hit by all of this now, and the election's in 30 days, and the question is, who is going to be able to turn out vote in Florida? Hillary Clinton has these field operations in place all over the state. They're going to be going door to door into dormitories, getting people out to vote. This hurricane's going up the east coast of Florida. Those are probably Trump voters. The I-44 corridor down the center of the state are Clinton voters, mostly Democrats. And if she has a better turnout machine and has more money to spend over the next 30 days than Donald Trump, who will be tweeting mainly to people, at the margin, I think this is going to help Hillary Clinton.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't really considered the fact that her timing of wanting to make this visit kind of coincide with this might have happened anyway because of the offices that you're talking about and because of the dire need that the Clinton campaign must feel now to try to get some of the corridor voters, as you talked about, I-40 and also probably some along I-95, I'd imagine, in that state too. So the timing of it might be somewhat, I don't know, fortuitous for her. Don't want to say that too harshly, though, because there are people in harm's way, but just the timing of it, not what's going on.
Well, at the same time, the Republicans in Florida are working hard to reelect Marco Rubio. They are behind him, and they're working hard.
Does that help Donald Trump?
That helps Trump if along the way they start campaigning for Trump as well, which incidentally has not been.
Together.
If they do it together, it would be in Trump's interest to campaign with Rubio.
But notice the difference in response. I think a Donald Trump, had he made the decision to put those ads on the Weather Channel, for example, he would have doubled down. The Clinton campaign is always sort of poll testing, and as soon as they feel anything, they jump back, and I think it shows a weakness on the part of that campaign. And
well, as far as the impact on the election, hasn't it already had one? Because it's reminded everybody of Baton Rouge, and in the wake of the devastation and the flooding there, Donald Trump was down there. He went down there. He made a very big point to look presidential, go tour the area, and then there were many calls for her to go do the same thing. But as far as the ads, it was an admission that it wasn't the right thing to do, right? To pull the ads in the first place.
And I think to some extent it was. And maybe the other analogy is Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah.
The federal response was so poor. You can bet the Obama administration is throwing FEMA and everything in there to make sure nothing goes wrong.
All right, we want to break in with breaking news now. Governor Deal of Georgia is speaking now with an update. They're next in the storm path. Let's watch.
They both called to say that they stood ready to help us. As I assured Governor Scott, we stood ready to help him in the aftermath of this hurricane. So it is always nice to know that you have people who are sensitive to what you're going through and who are pledging to stand ready to help you in a time of an emergency such as this. Now, there are a lot of things and a lot of issues that I'm sure the public wants to know and that you certainly want to be able to pass along to them. In order to do that without my going into detail and being duplicative of what they will tell you, I'm going to call on individuals to come up as they did yesterday, tell you about what their agency is doing and how it is in cooperation with other state agencies. And I will start with our GEMA director, Jim Butterworth.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon. Sheltering is ongoing. We currently have approximately 9,000 individuals who are in shelters at some point across about 30 different sheltering locations in Georgia. The capabilities at this point are we have a little over 13,000
So we heard the Governor Deal there of Georgia giving kind of an overview, and as they get point on point now with the citizens in their state and telling them where to go and what to do, we'll pull away. But when this makes news, we'll bring it back to you as it pertains to the storm. For now, a new report suggests top Obama administration officials may have been doing damage control over the Hillary Clinton email investigation, even before she launched her campaign for president, with an assist from the State Department staff. Yeah, there's some basketball lingo for you. Did they break the law with that assist? As part of our storms taken hold in parts, many parts of Haiti, but especially now, because when you look at the housing, the structures that were so tender when those huge winds and that massive force flattened in one town in particular, 80% of every structure. 80% of all the structures in one town gone. God bless those people in the Caribbean, particularly Haiti, that are feeling it today. We'll cover the storm more as it happens.
Top administration officials coordinated with Hillary Clinton early in her presidential campaign in response to stories about her private email server. This, according to the Wall Street Journal. The damage control, which includes close contact with the State Department early last year, was revealed in emails obtained by the Republican National Committee. One of the exchanges included a request by former White House Communications Director Jennifer Palmieri to the State Department, asking if Secretary of State John Kerry could be shielded from answering any questions concerning the email scandal. An expert on ethics tells the Journal that no laws were broken, while adding that emails still highlight the revolving door between the administration and officials in the Clinton campaign in its early stages. So, Dan, tell me, apparently no laws were broken. Why is this significant? Why should the American people care about this story?
Because it tells us something about the nature of any impending Clinton presidency, I would say. I mean, we went through this back during the presidency of Bill Clinton. I mean, it was one of the most volatile, litigious presidencies ever. And it wasn't just the women, but it was Whitewater, and it was all of the other issues like that. And the question was, were the Clintons putting the federal bureaucracy and the Justice Department in the service of their own personal interest? And the issue then was obstruction of justice. And what the State Department is doing here looks very much like obstruction of justice. And it isn't just the RNC that's being seeking these emails. At least 2 federal judges have ordered the State Department to release those emails. And yet the State Department is acting like a wing of the Hillary Clinton election campaign.
Melissa, what other media are covering this story? I know I was here in the studio all morning. Fox is covering it. Do you think this is going to have legs? Is it going to make a difference in this election?
No, it's not. I mean, I do think it will make a difference in the election, because I do think it has been a drumbeat throughout, and it does remind you of sort of that cloud of corruption that just surrounds the Clintons at all times, and it reminds you that kind of sick of that. Do we really want to go through that again? And that's why this is a change election. At the same time, to the first part of your question, I don't think it's getting a lot of coverage because, frankly, you know, it's difficult to parse. You know, when you go through and you're like, well, what were they supposed to be doing? It's hard to put it into a nutshell and say exactly what about it is wrong. And some people say, well, it's not illegal, so who cares? Because it's that continual drumbeat of corruption where they only care about themselves and they couldn't care less about any of you out there.
And then you see the people that were involved then carried into now with the Clinton campaign for presidency, because when talking about Jen Palmieri, we're talking about how she was involved then. She's currently Hillary Clinton's communications director for her campaign.
Well, how about Cheryl Mills? I mean, she was Hillary's lawyer and chief of staff back in the 1990s. It's the same group of people. And the irony is that the Obama presidency in 2008 defeated the Clinton machine. The progressives finally thought they had put the Clinton machine behind them.
True.
And now they're all coming back together.
You know, when you said the words, Dan, volatility and litigious about the Clinton years, it's one thing to say, can we go through that again? It's another to say, can we survive that as a nation, not being focused on the issues that continue to divide us? I mean, can we really survive that sort of attention away from the things that matter?
I think it's an excellent question because it has had such a corrosive effect on people's attitudes towards government. And I think that is in large part why so many voters are looking for a reason not to vote for Hillary Clinton, is because they have the sense that it's going to go back to the same old kind of insider dealing that they have felt in the past. And if Donald Trump would just give them some good reason not to vote for her, I think it could happen.
That sounds like you gave him a talking point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the media, because
watching.
Kerry, by the way, did not get asked that question in the interview that was in question. So a collusion with the media as well.
Yeah.
Hurricane Matthew moving up the East Coast. We've been following it for you here on Fox News. People in Jacksonville, Florida area now are being warned of a possible devastating storm surge. The storm is hitting there, beginning to the Category 3 storm already has knocked out electricity to more than 500,000 people, following the latest track for you. And the Syrian civil war just took a dire turn. In fact, our Associated Press wires are lighting up right now. A UN envoy warned Aleppo could be in ruins with thousands of civilians killed, caught there. Daniel, our guest today, not mincing words, calling Aleppo, quote, Obama's Sarajevo. He's been writing about it. Stay close. We are just learning now the UN Security Council has called a closed emergency meeting on Syria after a UN envoy warned yesterday of more than 275,000 people hanging in the balance, and now reports that Russian and Syrian government air bombardment of Aleppo in Syria is unabated. Unabated. They're just firing on people. Our guest today, Daniel, has written about this. You have called this President Obama's Sarajevo, which will be seared on his legacy. So no matter what else he tries to do, here's the quote, and then I'll come to you. It's not merely that the U.S. has done so little directly to help the Syrian rebels. The more fundamental failure is that Mr. Obama has refused to permit the arming of people who are willing to fight on their own behalf against a dictator committed to the mass slaughter of innocent civilians, end quote. Dan?
Well, yeah, I mean, this was back in 2011, and the question then was whether we should arm the Syrian Free Army. And Barack Obama decided he would not, and to this day he has refused to do it. We may be past the point where it would make any difference. We have been there before, Harris, and this was in the mid-1990s when Bill Clinton was president, and we had the Balkan Wars going on, in which the Serbs put to siege the city of Dubrovnik, beautiful city, and Sarajevo for 4 years. Constant, relentless shelling. It transfixed the world. The world was in horror over what was going on in Sarajevo. And the same thing now is happening in Aleppo, a besieged city. 500,000 people have died in Syria, 4.8 million refugees, and Barack Obama has stood by doing nothing. Bill Clinton eventually allowed the shipment of arms into the Croats and Bosnians, turned that around, and we ended up with the Dayton peace agreements. There's not going to be any peace agreement.
So you laid out what we did not do and what we're looking at as a result of that. Can anything be done now at this point?
Well, they're going to have a UN Security Council meeting today. I think the Russians will do what they've been doing to John Kerry, is to stiff them, because the Russians are participating in this relentless bombardment of Aleppo right now. There's very little we can do. Perhaps if we could get a ceasefire, we could talk about a future for Syria. And I frankly, Sandra, think they're going to probably have to partition that country, separate the Alawites from the Kurds and the rest of these people. That wouldn't be the end of it, but that's what happens when you let things roll as far downhill as Barack Obama has.
Some of the same argument could be made for what should have or could have or might still be done in Iraq. It's interesting to have those countries next door to each other, to have parallel kind of tribal differences, if you will. I wondered what verb you were going to use when you said what the Russians are doing to Secretary Kerry. Go ahead, Melissa.
No, and I mean, you painted a really bleak image in that article of how we've become in some ways numb to this. I mean, even when we see the videos of the children there, that, you know, when you stand by and you don't do anything for a while and you start to become numb, and you talked about world leaders like Barack Obama pulling the shade on the situation and walking away, and then that really gives it that implicit go-ahead to really keep going on, and it brings to life all these other problems. I mean, maybe if we had done something about this, it would have curbed the influence of ISIS, you know, and it just... I do. It's heartbreaking because I remember when we first started watching these videos of this happening so long ago, and it's still going on, and we've still done.
Right. It has a corrosive effect on our moral sensibilities. We've had all of these shootings here in the United States. What was the most recent one? The guy who went into the mall in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and gunned down and knifed all those people, and yet people sort of go, well, it's another terrible thing, we have to move on and go back to business as usual, and you just become numb because there's no real response to these things.
But Barack Obama seems very focused right now on his legacy. Can you talk about how much of the decision to not do anything about these war crimes, or even the original decision not to do anything about the red line, has to do with his Iran deal?
It has everything to do with the Iran deal, which he thought was going to be the spotlight of his legacy, but that kind of annihilation in Aleppo will not be forgotten as part of the Obama legacy.
Yeah, you talk about that insensitivity. You remember the picture of the little boy in the buildings were hit in Aleppo. We have seen so much, but you're right, when we don't get the trigger, the conscience trigger, I suppose, from a president, we can do it for ourselves, but it helps if it comes from the top.
Exactly.
All right, we're continuing to track Hurricane Matthew as it hits. Leaving Florida for Georgia and on up the Carolinas now. States of emergency declared in those states, and the danger is far from over, as we've been saying, because of the storm surge along the coastline. Stay with us.
Today is a very special day here at Fox. The channel marks 20 years since we first came into your home.
Yeah, it's a birthday. Wow. And 20 never looked so good. We want to thank all of our loyal viewers for making us #1 for so many years. Your love and your support, we feel it here at Fox News Channel on behalf of everybody. Thank you.
It is a wonderful day indeed to celebrate.
It is. We're going to party like
and thank you for joining us on Outnumbered every day. We're going 2.5 years here. Good to have you today, Dan.
Good to be with you.
Yeah, great to have you.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, thanks to Dan Henninger. We're back on TV Monday at noon Eastern. The celebration continues. Happening Now starts right now.